a Fox News analyst, Margaret Hoover.
Hey.
How are you, Margaret?
Thanks for having me. How fun is this?
It's a lot of fun. Margaret's also, by the way, the great-granddaughter of Herbert Hoover.
Herbert Hoover, 31st President of the United States. Some of you might have thought the FBI guy, not the FBI guy.
No, that's J. Edgar Hoover, who dressed up like a tranny, right?
Yeah, apparently. That's what they say, at least.
That's
yeah.
right.
Yeah, my guy was a fisherman. He didn't dress up like that.
A fisherman?
Dressed up in a sports coat and a tie every time I went fly fishing.
Fisherman like Sarah Palin.
Well, apparently she does moose. She's a moose hunter. Apparently.
I think she does some fishing, too. I saw
sure
a picture with a fish.
Like serious fishing, though, on boats with,
big
wild game salmon.
Right, that's true. Now, some people are comparing George W. Bush, with the economic problems we've been having to your great-grandfather.
Which is a bit of a stretch.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, how do you feel about that, and are you more offended for George W. Bush or your great-grandfather?
Both of them. First of all, partly for George W. Bush, you make a very, very fair point. Totally unrelated economic circumstances. I mean, what happened in 1929 with the collapse of the stock market was completely unprecedented. I mean, never happened in world history since or before. And it's funny, over the last 70, 80 years of American history, they've sort of pulled Herbert Hoover out of the basement of history to remind us of the negative associations. So people don't even know anything about him anymore. They just think, oh, Hoover equals bad economic policy. And that was partially because of the intense partisanship that has gone on since FDR. I mean, FDR had the presidency for 12 years after that, and he just slammed him down in the basement of history. And so people don't know anything about Herbert Hoover.
Do you still get crap for that? They're like, oh, she's Herbert Hoover's great-granddaughter. You caused the Great Depression.
I was taught in 8th grade that he caused the Great Depression. I mean, the history books are still wrong about it.
Well, I don't know if they're wrong about it. It was a
So you're saying he caused the Great Depression?
No,
Are you saying that
a
president caused a major economic global downturn?
What we do on the program is we don't do black and white, we do gray. Okay, which means that there are a number of factors that cause the Great Depression. If you just said Herbert Hoover caused the Great Depression by himself, that would be crazy. But at the same time, to say Herbert Hoover didn't contribute to a situation that led to the Great Depression,
I would actually argue that point. I would actually
unfair.
argue that point with you, and I will take you point by point through history.
I love that we're arguing Herbert Hoover. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I should bring Jonathan Alter on here. He's from Newsweek.
Yeah,
and he wrote
Jonathan
the book
has written about FDR, and Amity Schlaze has also written extensively about this. And Herbert Hoover, look, the biggest point they'll say about Herbert Hoover is that he passed, there's this thing called the Smoot-Hawley Act. Now, I know your listeners probably have no idea about Smoot-Hawley.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I think they're very well educated, but okay, so your listeners do, but most Americans don't, right? So Smoot-Hawley was the act of Congress, which was a tariff protective act. They said that by closing off tariffs, by not trading internationally, it actually worsened the Great Depression. Happens that Congress passed it overwhelmingly, and the president was working with Congress to sign it, but who gets blamed? The president. So, it turns out our understanding of economics at the time was just simply more primitive than it is now. So it's very hard to just blame it all on Hoover when there was, an act of Congress that overwhelmingly supported it.
I love how you're sticking up for your family. That's good. I like that. I'd stick up for my family,
too. To
be
honest, my dad got a black eye in the playground growing up because his grandpa caused the Great Depression. So, it gets a little personal over time, right?
That's
and,
awesome.
History's got to set itself straight over time.
All right. No, I like that you're battling for it. But that also provides a good transition to now, okay? Because, you know what? Congress also went along with George Bush every step of the way, especially from 2000 to 2006.
So you're going to argue that George Bush's policies have caused the economic downturn now?
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
I mean, do you think that he is at all culpable, given that, for example, some of the laws that were passed allowed for more lax regulation, whether it was Enron, the energy collapse,
Enron
financial?
happened right at the beginning, so it wasn't specifically because of George Bush's regulation.
No, it was actually, you're right. It was actually more Phil Gramm. It was actually more Phil Gramm's law that was passed during the Clinton years, but Phil Gramm did lead that.
Then you'd admit that's hard to pin on President Bush.
Under Republican philosophy, which Clinton went along with too much when he passed those laws.
Okay.
But as far as blaming it on Bush specifically, you're right about that.
I mean, frankly, I think we could have had, Bush came into the presidency at the end of a huge expansion in American politics, right? I mean, Clinton sat on this great economic expansion, and things started to go south as soon as Bush got in power. I think his tax cuts actually helped infuse the economy with a little bit more vibrancy than it probably would have had. So
I don't actually disagree with that.
Okay.
But here's the thing. Whenever you do tax cuts, of course it's going to help the economy a little bit in the short term. Okay. Now the question is it worth it for the long-term damage that it does? Because there's possibility of long-term damage. And in this case, we took basically $1.8 trillion out of the budget with those tax cuts. It cost the budget $1.8 trillion, which then led to deficits, which led to a weaker dollar, which led to gas being
Here's where I got to disagree.
more, etc.
What I would suggest is that, and this is proven, when taxes go down, receipts go up. It seems counterintuitive. You lower taxes, people spend more money, you invest more. Receipts in the federal government, when I was working in the Office of Management and Budget at the White House in 2005, we kept looking at the numbers going, but receipts are up. The Treasury is taking in more money. Why is that? That's because the economy is more vibrant. You're spending more money.
Here's a couple problems with that, Margaret. We're talking to Margaret Hoover. She's a Fox News analyst, and as you just heard, she worked at the Office of Management and Budget in the Bush administration. Margaret, it's the Laffer curve, and I'm familiar with it, supply-side economics. But it has, one, a logical problem, and two, a practical problem. The logical problem is you can't continue to cut taxes forever.
Forever. That's true.
Right.
That's true.
So
That's
the question
true.
is,
it is a short-term solution.
No, right. So the question is, where does it make sense to put taxes? Okay, it's not should you cut taxes or should you raise taxes. In the abstract, that means absolutely nothing because you got to tell me what the taxes are and how the economy's doing. So your argument isn't cutting taxes works. Your argument is cutting taxes within this current economic climate still works. Okay. All right.
Generally, I'm a proponent for cutting taxes. I think lower government taxes is generally
but
better
you would
for
agree
the economy.
that you would agree that if we were at 15% taxes, we shouldn't cut them to 13%.
Yeah, you might be splitting hairs there, right? But
okay,
to go from a cap gains tax of 15% or 25% and put it back up at 35%, not so helpful, especially when the economy is already struggling right now. People are struggling to pay gas prices.
Okay, so now that gets to the practical problem with the Laffer curve, which is that Bill Clinton did raise taxes for the higher income brackets and for corporate rates. And what happened was revenues went up. Now, you say revenues went up under Bush, but revenues went up under Clinton.
Receipts went up.
I'm sorry, receipts. Yeah. Receipts went up under Bush, but receipts went up under Clinton even more. So it's not to say that receipts wouldn't go up even higher if you raise taxes rather than cut taxes.
The two scenarios, though, is that during the last decade, the economy was growing massively. We actually have had an economic downturn, and by cutting taxes, we saw receipts go up. So you do have to you have to be responding to the changing games in economics, right? Like, you have to, and I agree, look, one thing I will give you is that Republicans have traditionally been the party of balancing the budget and been responsible fiscally, and that has not been the case in the last 8 years. That, I think, is a major shame for the party, and we need to get back to our roots of fiscal conservatism.
Okay, I want to ask you about that, but Margaret, I would actually not agree with you on that. Because I used to be a Republican, and I believed that I was a Republican because of that. But then looking back on it,
you're thinking Reagan spending for national defense, but that was
you say spending for national defense, but the bottom line is, when I look back at it,
the
only guy who ever balanced the budget was Bill Clinton, and all the Republicans in my lifetime have been terrible at fiscal responsibility, have been terrible at building up deficits. That's one of the reasons I stopped being a Republican. I was like, you know what, they say they're good at it, but actually when you look at the record, they're terrible at it.
George Bush actually was, unfortunately raised taxes, but also did it
George
because George H.W. Bush, 41, as we refer to him. Yeah, because he raised taxes?
No, because he was responsible.
He was fiscally responsible, and he knew it was in a crunch. He knew it would cost him, and it did.
It did, and that's brave. He did
the political courageous thing, and I support the politically courageous thing, but I do not support, in the name of fiscal responsibility, raising taxes and not learning what we've learned about the economy, that when you do lower taxes, you're generating economic activity.
No,
and that people are spending more, and that you have the ability. What's happened is we took in more, and then we spent more. So what we really need to do is stop spending egregiously, and stop Congress from spending out of control, and stop earmarks and pork.
Now, I totally disagree with that, but I want to get your sense of how we do it under your plan, okay?
Right.
And as I explained...
Under the Margaret Hoover...
Exactly.
Great-granddaughter of Herbert Hoover plan.
Right, exactly. Under the great-granddaughter of Herbert Hoover's plan. Let's see what kind of trouble we get into now. No.
We're going to fix it, baby. We're going to fix it.
All right. So, I always hear from the Republicans, no, we got to cut tax, but the problem is spending. But what are you going to do realistically? I hear you on that. But
it's like you're saying, you don't do black, you don't do white, you do gray.
Exactly. But what do you do? Let's get specific.
Yeah.
Let's get specific. Because if you tell me earmarks, it's a tiny percentage of
the budget. It's about $18 billion.
$18 billion is a drop in the bucket. Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty good place to start.
Okay, but let's say, I'll give it to you all. Let's say John McCain's a budgetary hero. He cuts money to Israel. He cuts money to everything, and all the earmarks are gone, which is impossible. But let's give it to him. $18 billion.
Well,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, pork doesn't go to Israel. Pork goes to bridges to nowhere.
There are earmarks for Israel, but don't worry about it. It's not important. Okay, let's give it to him, right?
Okay.
But first of all, the war alone is at least 10 times as much.
Got to fix entitlement spending.
Entitlement spending is 1% of the budget.
No, it is not.
Oh, you're talking about Medicare,
I'm talking Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security.
So that's a great question. So are you going to take that away from folks? What are you going to do?
Well, you can reform it using free market principles. I mean, here's what you've done in Canada, right? Okay. Folks in Canada have privatized Social Security. Ooh, bad word in the United States. You hear George Bush talking about it, 60 events, nobody understands, they're never going to get their Social Security back. Wrong. In Canada, what they've done, they've taken somewhere between 1% and 3% and privatized it, and it has totally fixed the financial side of their broken Medicare system.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some really market-based solutions here that we can look at and just consider, and then make it optional so people don't have to. And I mean, how can you have been a free market guy and say not and laugh and not actually seriously consider the energy of our economy and tapping that and harnessing that?
I'll tell you why, Margaret. And I love that we have a Hoover on the program talking about privatizing Social Security. That's awesome. We're in a time.
This is individualism, baby. This is how it works.
Now, here's the thing.
The engine of our economy.
When I look at it, I'm a free market guy. I don't believe in no bid contracts, to Halliburton, et cetera. Okay, but but the thing is, some things the government does better than others. And when you look at the history of Social Security, it's a miraculous success. No one is starved in. No old person is starved in the country.
With you there.
But wait a minute, let's talk about that. No old person has starved in the streets in this country since we started Social Security. Everybody loves Social Security for a reason. And if you touch Social Security, you get into a lot of trouble.
Actually, no, you don't. You know why?
Oh, really?
Because it's empty. Like, we've been borrowing from Social Security for years.
No. But that's the other part of it that's amazing.
Social Security is going to run out of money.
No, Social Security is running giant surpluses. We're just taking those surpluses and spending
not
it
anymore
in our regular
spend
budget.
Everywhere else.
Right. So that goes to show you it's not Social Security's problem. It's that we've spent it in other places, including defense spending.
But I mean, the problem is, as we both understand, I think, about Social Security, is that the aging population is growing so much. Baby boomers are going to come. We're not going to have enough money in the Social Security budget, even if we were to pay ourselves back for all the money we've overspent that was in Social Security. There's not going to be enough to pay for a growing aging population.
But Margaret, do you think Social Security hasn't worked though?
Up till now, if you consider working feeding old people when they get old and they can't feed themselves working, yes, it's done that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I consider.
If that's
that's great, isn't it? That's terrific.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I don't think everybody. I think not everybody needs the government to take care of them when they hit 65.
Yeah, but some do. That's the point of government.
Right. And for the people who can't take care of themselves, we can do that. And I'm okay with that. But let's fix it, because it's not going to be able to pay for everybody when the baby boomers hit 65.
I got an easy fix.
What's your fix?
People making over $250,000, and I would love to be in that category. And if I am, and I have to chip in a little bit more for Social Security,
or you
I'm
start
live
saving
with
yourself on the side. I mean, we need to encourage people to do retirement savings.
That's not true, Margaret. Because
why don't we encourage people to be responsible fiscally themselves too? If we demand that of our country, if we demand that of our government.
No. I'll tell you why. Because Social Security isn't supposed to be how you retire. You're supposed to save on your own anyway. And that's the whole point of the free market. I save on my own. I'm sure you save on your own. And we shouldn't have to encourage people like a big parent, like, that's what conservatives don't want, right? Government being a big dad and saying, okay, make sure you save more. Social Security is supposed to be a safety net. So for the people who really need it.
If it's a safety net, why does every single individual in America get it?
Because
it's not a safety net. It's the retirement program for Americans. That's how FDR set it up.
We've decided as a society that we should all have that minimum. Now, if you say some of us shouldn't have it, that's an interesting question, but I think we'd be better off if we all have it as a safety net for all of us.
Then it's going to have to be reformed, because the budget simply isn't going to continue
to be... No, but we can do an easy fix to tax a little bit more for 250,000
So you're saying tax more so that everybody else can still get it.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's where I would just respectfully disagree with you.
But see, here's the thing.
I think you can use free market principles to reform it, so everyone get it. You don't have to tax it. It can be
But we already have the
optional.
free market, which is that. Why don't you just save more?
Not so much. Not in the Social Security programs. I mean, it's mandated. It's taxes. It's not saving. It's reallocating taxes.
But taxes is always reallocating. They take my money and they reallocate it to Halliburton.
You're not going to continue to have enough of it when the baby boomers hit 65.
So let's do Medicare and Medicaid. But again, with the numbers, it's easy to have enough, and we would have enough if we hadn't just spent it surplus.
We're going to have enough. It's just you and I disagree on the principles of how we provide enough.
Exactly. Okay,
and you think the government should provide it, and I think we can harness the free market and individualism to fix it.
Okay, here's the problem with that libertarian kind of thinking, okay?
There's no problem with this libertarian kind of thinking.
In my opinion. Okay, we're talking to Margaret Hoover, who's a Fox News analyst. Margaret, and she was at the OMB for the Bush administration. Margaret, the problem is, we were talking to a libertarian yesterday, and she said we should privatize the fire department, too. The problem is sometimes people are in fires and they didn't think ahead. And we need to rescue them anyway. Sometimes people didn't think ahead and they're 72 years old and they're starving. And we need to help them anyway. Sometimes people are really sick.
Compassion. I do love your compassion. I think compassion is important. I'm not advocating not having compassion. I just think there's multiple ways to do this. And I think we need to put everything on the table and really look at it. But I think we really ought to look at, the engines of our economy and the reason for our success in this country is because we've empowered individuals to be creative and think outside the box and not had government telling them what to do.
I love that, and I want them to do that. But what happens to the people who fall through the cracks? Are we going to let them go?
No.
Are we going to let them go?
No, you can't do that. You absolutely can't let people go.
That's what these programs are for.
These programs are for everyone, not just the people who can't fall through the cracks.
Okay,
everyone
so ironically,
everyone gets Medicaid and Medicare.
Ironically, and we'll wrap up on this. That's okay. We'll wrap up on this. Ironically, you actually want these programs to be more welfare, like for people who actually need it, and not for everybody.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not even saying take Social Security away from everyone. I'm just saying let's apply some free market principles because this is the free market is the engine of our economy. This is what makes us work.
I know, but we already have their free market. They can
Not in
just save on their own.
Not in Social Security we don't. We tax individuals and then we give the money that they pay in their taxes to the people who are 65 and over now.
Yes.
That system is not going to continue to work. That's not you're talking about a safety net as being the people who are falling through the cracks, but everybody gets it, not just the people falling through the cracks right now.
It's a safety net for all of us. That's what it is. But that's okay. We disagree on it, and it's been a really good conversation.
Thank you for having me on.
I really appreciate you coming on. Margaret Hoover from Fox News.